Ladies and gentlemen, let me we start with the few words which are very important before that we will go forward. We have to look at the background of this event. Excellencies, Honorable and Ambassadors, why the International Conference on the Sovereignty of Syria and Political Dialogue for Peace 2021 has been convened by the International Human Rights Commission. The background, everyone knows that the unrest in Syria, which began on the 15th March in 2011 as the part of the wider Arab Spring protest, which somehow supported by the outside powers in the region, grew out of the discontent with the Syrian government and escalated to an armed conflict after protest calling for the President Assad's removal and free and fair elections. The war is being fought by the several factions, the Syrian Armed Forces and its democratic and international allies, a loose alliance of the mostly Sunni opposition rival groups such as the Free Syrian Army, Salafi jihadist group including al-Nusra Front and Tahrir al-Sham, the mixed Kurdish-Arab Syrian Democratic Forces (SDF) and the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant ISIL, and then the ISIS has been inducted over there. A number of the foreign countries such as Iran, Israel, Russia, Turkey, and the United States has either directly involved them in the conflict or provided support to one or another faction. Some of these terrorist organizations, which are declared by the United Nations as terrorist organizations, are the responsible of the Syrian people miseries backed by the foreign countries. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, around 13.4 million people are estimated to require some of the form of humanitarian and protection assistance inside Syria. 6.7 million people internally displaced and more than 5.6 million refugees in neighboring countries and in the border region due to the war imposed on the name of democracy, human rights since 10 years. Excellencies, the International Human Rights Commission, in very start of the civil unrest, presented the peace plan, 7 points peace plan, on 4th of January 2013, which was primarily was accepted by the President Assad government and all other parties in Syria, but was declined by the foreign countries. I, as the world chair of the International Human Rights Commission, led the negotiation on peace plan and visited Damascus from 4 to 6 January 2013 and met the Syrian groups, media, lawyers, high government officials, and called on the foreign countries to stop interfering in the Syrian unrest so that all parties should sit together and start working on the roadmap of democracy, free and fair elections, constitutional reforms, and human rights mechanism. Unfortunately, the world power and some countries of the region invested into the unrest to turn into the war against the President Assad and start demanding his resignation, which in principle was refused by the President Assad. The International Human Rights Commission, before this conference, convened the conference on 26 February 2013, in which the conflict of Syria and the resolution was passed by the representative of the 37 countries and in person. That conference held in Pakistan, and the government of Pakistan, the other countries has supported the conflict resolution with the aspiration of the people of Syria, not by the aspiration of the foreign-backed countries or the foreign peoples. International Human Rights Commission as an intergovernmental organization, continuing our efforts in Middle East through our Middle East office as our special envoy for the United Nations Geneva, His Excellency Ambassador Hassan Boussayer is a very much instrumental for making a peace efforts into the region. This is not a humanitarian crisis. We have to look at that today in 2021, at least 4.2 billion is required for the humanitarian response plan in Syria, and US 5.8 billion is required for the Syria regional response plan as mentioned by the European Union and the United Nations. Our principal stand is why not these all amounts should be spent, and these all funds should be spent into the Syria for the resettlement of the all Syrian refugees and all destruction which has been happened in the last 10 years, and to give a chance, a peaceful resolution to the peoples of Syria itself, other than the peoples of outside of the Syria. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, we had invited many of the peoples, the dignitaries, ambassadors, leaders in this conference, and might be because of the ongoing European and the foreign governments pressure on the many leaders, they are unable to attend. Few of them has refused. This is the backdrop of the and background of the all crisis which is happening in Syria. Syrian conflict is not an easy conflict. As we all know that United States of America, Russia, Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Gulf states having their own interest into the region. And for that reason, the war has been imposed on the people of Syria. I am not in favor of any human rights atrocities, violations, and we are very much backing the democratic process in every country, and so on for the Syria. The question is that those countries are supporting the democracy and human rights war in Syria, those who are not even having the democracy and respect of human rights into their own countries. This is a dilemma of the third world countries, and this is a dilemma of the developed countries and double standards policies which has led the world on the verge of collapse. This pandemic, which the whole world is facing, has also shown that how the lies and double standard put the whole humanity at risk. Still, on the name of vaccination nationalism is going on. On the name of democracy, lies has been put in front of the peoples. On the name of human rights, the peoples and countries and the system has been blackmailed. This is a nonsense happening into our world. And we are not ready. We have to work it out together to put the whole humanity on the way of prosperity. Excellency, by these words, I want to highlight the peace plan which has been presented by the International Human Rights Commission on the 4th of January 2013. The peace plan was consisting on the 7 points. 1. The Western powers and the Arab countries must stop to backing and support by all means to the armed opposition groups in Syria. 2. The armed groups should lay down arms and start acting as a democratic groups who believes in peace and empowerment of the people through peaceful table talks. 3. Syrian government, in response to this step, must recognize the efforts for peace, full dialogues, and should enter in peace talks under the international community and IHRC auspicious, which should be supported by the United Nations, European Union, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and Arab leagues in a larger interest of the regional peace. 4. Syrian government must stop the military action and release all the political prisoners as the gesture for the peace talk under the IHRC and international community mediators. 5. Reforms in the constitution of the Syria should be introduced through the dialogue and with the participation of all political groups. 6. All efforts to destabilization the peace in Syria must be ended if the world wants peace in the region, and any move of a foreign intervention and or a support for an armed struggle must be addressed as in terrorism. 7. International Human Rights Commission will ensure to help and assist the people and government of Syria to come up with the meaningful peaceful dialogues and talks and to move on the path of democracy and respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the country. These 7 points been presented on the 4th of January 2013. Excellencies, on the January 6, 2013, President Bashar al-Assad came out on the national television, and what he said, I want to quote that. President Assad said, "These feelings of annoyance, sadness, challenges, and intention are a hard energy that will not get Syria out of its crisis unless it turns the energy into the comprehensive national move that saves the homeland from the unprecedented campaign hedged against it. This national move is the only balm for the deep wounds which affected our society and were about to divide it, as it is the only way that is able to keep Syria geographically and making it politically stronger." He added that at the beginning, I wanted to let you know that revolution for the people of Syria is not a rebellion against them. We are ready to talk as proposed by many international organizations. As I heard the peace mission ongoing in Syria, in Damascus by the International Human Rights Commission, we are welcoming their suggestions. This is what the Syrian president, on just after presenting my points and a peace plan, 7-point peace plan in the Syria, has been said into the national media. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, today, still, after 10 years, we are standing nowhere. The miseries of the Syrian peoples are still there. No one is looking towards them. Everybody is looking towards their own interest. What about the people of Syria?
Very much. Good morning here in Ecuador, probably good evening where you are now, or good afternoon. I'm sorry for the delay in joining the meeting. It was misunderstood about the hour of the presentation today, but I'm a lot interested in human rights and how we can help to have really a world peace with the recognition of human rights in everywhere, in any place in the world. We in Latin America, we are suffering a really hard situation because of the diaspora of Venezuelans going out of the country because of the political situations of this country. It is the first time that we had in Latin America something like that, because for economical situations, they had been problems and people had to emigrate and leave their countries in different periods of our life because of economic crisis. But this time it's different in Venezuela, with more than 5 million Venezuelans going out of the country. In Ecuador, that is a small country, we have almost 500,000 of Venezuelans living. And why I start my speech talking about Venezuela is because some people find some similarities between Venezuela and what's happening in Syria. And of course, it has to be with how population are feeling, how is the situation of leaving their homes. I was reading something about Syria. I had never been there, but of course, I'm very I have a lot of solidarity about the situation, especially of women and kids. That is so important then to establish a dialogue for a political dialogue for peace in Syria. I think it is very important, not only for the region where Syria is located, for the Arab world, for this side of the planet, but also for humanity. I am totally convinced that if there is a spot in the world where we don't have the consecration, the determination to have the human rights in all the levels, from the first generation, second generation, third generation, as you, Ambassador Sahid, said many times, we will not have peace in the world. We need that the human rights, that all what means the recognition of the rights of the people in different areas of the world is so important for the world peace. And of course, Syria is one of the places that call the attention for the world in many moments of our lives. The only thing that I want to say is that in Latin America, we are concerned about the situation, and we feel that we can put our efforts also to make the dialogue possible. Thank you very much.
Doctor, thank you, fellow colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Dr. Sahid, what he has been doing, directly contact with the authorities of Syria to help solve those problems. It is for me a great honor and a pleasure for me to stand here as a keynote speaker. I would like to thank the members of the Board of International Human Rights Commission for inviting me to take part in this conference on sovereignty of Syria and the political dialogue
Thank you,
for Peace 2001.
Thank you, Excellency.
Again, I'm very, very, very impressed by the dynamic effort of International Human Rights Commission to help find solutions for different problems of the world is facing today. And we appreciate a lot as a chairman what you have been done to find a solution for Syria. The Syria civil war has been going on since 2011, involving several armed groups. It started as a consequence of Arab Spring protests that spread across Arab countries with call for more democratic openness. In 10 years of the conflict resulted in a death of about 600,000 people. Although the climate is not solely responsible for the outbreak of the Syrian war, 2011, it cannot be ignored that the desertification of the once prosperous country was a factor in making an already toxic regional cocktail explosive. The civil war in Syria has become a major conflict, mainly due to the foreign interference in the country. Several countries were directly or indirectly involved in the conflict, financing certain groups. The war watched Syria become the scene of dispute of interest between nations. I want to remember that one of the first group of refugee Syrian, they came to Guinea-Bissau. The first group of the refugee is very strange to come to West Africa, a small country, in a transition period. We gave them all the necessary, and they want to go to Europe. They got all the visa, and we allow them to go to Portugal, Lisbon. And the international community didn't understand why Guinea-Bissau received those refugees and they let them go to Europe, to Portugal. The consequence of over 10 years, the Syrian civil war has left serious consequences in the Middle East countries. The war was responsible for destroying the country's infrastructure, putting a large part of the local population in a situation of poverty, and it was responsible for the death of thousands of people. There are also reports of about 2 million people who were injured during the conflict. Among these people, thousands were left with some kind of permanent physical disability. Another consequence was the large number of people who was forced to leave their homes. The war was put thousands of people in a delicate situation, and many have difficulty obtaining food. Thousands of children have had their chance of building a better future destroyed by being left uneducated. And the millions of Syrians have suffered from the destruction of the country's health system over the 10 years of war. The Syrian conflict remains one of the largest humanitarian and the refugee crises in the world. If there is no concrete action for peace, and Syria will become yet another country with chronic instability, as in the case of Iraq and Afghanistan, for example. Excellency, I would like to propose some potential solution to problems created by the crisis in the line of Human Rights Commission. This is to add what the Human Rights Commission was proposed. First one, there cannot be military solution to this conflict. Sustaining the peace and stability can only be achieved with an authentic, inclusive, comprehensive political solution led by the Syrians themselves. The strategy of regime change should not be an option. And the deepening a sustainable dialogue with the government of Syria and the opposition around the need to build trust and the pursuit of safe, calm, and a neutral environment. Help Syrians to make the transition to more secure infrastructure in terms of energy and water. Help Syrians to protect the unity, sovereignty, and the territorial integrity of the Syrian state, and eradicate terrorism and the foreign occupation as elements necessary to resolve the humanitarian crisis. Deepening a sustainable dialogue with government of Syria and the opposition around the need to build trust in pursuit of safe, calm, and a neutral environment. And undertake more concrete action on detainees and the detainee, abductees, and the missing persons. At the last, convene a credibly balanced and inclusive constitutional committee as soon as possible. The proposed constitutional committee should have the chance to put in place leaders who will protect the people rather than harm them. Thank you. This is what, from my experience, during leading the transition period in Guinea-Bissau during 2 years, I think this is a piece of part of the solution I'm and proposing for Syria. And this is go in the line of International Human Rights Commission proposed that this is to add only. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency Prime Minister.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would like to send my salutation to Her Excellency, the President of Ecuador, and to my friend, the Prime Minister of Guinea-Bissau, Dr. Rui Barros, and to all my colleagues at the International Human Rights Commission. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to emphasize on what Prime Minister Barros said. I believe we discussed this matter, and I'm confirming what His Excellency said at the beginning of his speech on the hosting of Guinea-Bissau, with many thanks what they did. And we spoke a lot, and we tried to find also an alternative situation to bring help to the many countries, including Guinea-Bissau. This is number one. Number two, and before starting to dissect the data that brought the situation in Syria to the way things have reached, it must be stressed that social and political reforms are among the basic points that the state must undertake and stipulated in all local and international constitutions. However, the exploitation of this negligence, which is not justified in order to eliminate an entire society by countries and groups that have been classified as terrorists, this is unacceptable and must be condemned and constantly reminded. As for being dragged behind international slogans to satisfy certain parties at the expense of the Syrian society and its security, this also must be condemned as well. Unfortunately, there are personalities and officials who have informed us of serious confessions regarding their involvement in the Syrian events and exposed the scheme of some officials in Arab and Western countries, and revealed the size of the plot that they plotted to topple the regime in Syria with their prior knowledge of the blood bill that will occur, not as indifferent as they claim in the media statements. The other problem is the size of the media facility that international bodies proceed by fabricating the media and filming crimes that occurred only in the Hollywood films that they produced and marketed through well-known international satellite channels, and they were affixed to the Syrian army as the one who committed them. And attention has turned a blind eye to the humanitarian crimes committed by the Takfiri groups, which we call the terrorist groups that are condemned by the United Nations, and logistical and financial support by 98 countries, and all this under the pretext of protecting the Syrian people. 40% of the Syrian people have been displaced between inside and outside the country under the same pretext, and here the displaced are living the worst reality of their life in diaspora countries, despite the funds they announced and were estimated at tens of billions of dollars. And all this is, in the majority of it, the military support went to the people fighting amongst themselves. As for the chemical issue that these countries played on their strings and put pressure on the fact-finding committee, and not referring to any party that used it in Duma, Eastern Ghouta, and Khan al-Assad, which changed it to accuse the Syrian army of this and acquit the groups of that to escape from uncovering specialized laboratories for the manufacture of these types of missiles. Backed by Arab and foreign countries, it must be noted here that Syria has handed over its stockpile of chemicals and weapons to an international committee that recognized this, and despite this, those countries used the pretext to accuse the army of using it against civilians without showing any reliable evidence, except for media statements and films fabricated by terrorist groups, and with full coordination with the White Helmet and the countries that media channels that funded these fake campaigns. From here, we point out the importance of opening a transparent investigation into all that was issues above and bringing them to a court to be agreed upon between the main parties and who are known of their integrity. And we also call on all concerned countries to engage in the work of serious
Ambassador, are you there? Ambassador.
I think some problem with his voice.
Yes.
Yeah, I think he's like frozen. Yeah.
Yeah.
You cannot hear him.
Yeah, we cannot hear him. In the meantime, he joined.
and the internet shut down. So I was at the end, and I was saying that I was ending by saying that from here we point out the importance of open, transparent investigation into all that was issued above and bringing them to a court to be agreed upon between the main parties and who are known for their integrity. And we also call on all concerned countries to engage in the work of serious accountability for those persons in countries who have reached the situation in Syria to what it has reached. For us, it is especially those who supported with money those countries that are backing and still backing all these terrorist groups. And unfortunately, we came back to the first point of the escalation since the 2011, as we understand from various resources, political.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank you for inviting me to give a speech on Syria's sovereignty. And I would like to start by greeting all employees and the interested in the human rights organization and the interest in the human rights organization, the organization that strives to achieve social justice and to protect people from human oppression. Excellency, whoever kills a person is a human being. Whoever oppresses a person is also a human being. Whoever violates human rights is also a human being. And sovereignty begins with a person and is from beginning to end for the sake of man. Excellency, the human being is the basis of the state. One state is sovereign, the human being is sovereign in it. Would not be small if not great. Among these elements is the flag of the state, which expresses the state known by it and which it is dignitaries and its defenders are rabid and it is banner. And it is internationally recognizes borders. Excellency, the national anthem, there is no state that does not have an anthem. That is repeated by the young and old bleed in local and international forums. The name of the state whose identity and all plead in local and international forums. The name of the state whose identity becomes its citizens wherever they go or stay. Even if the optim as scanned nationality. The first identity remains the pieces, the constitution that protect it and its citizens and preserves their rights. It is constitutionally elected president who presents and implements its constitution and text it for the future. Excellency, my country, which for 10 years we subjected to the agreed types of terrorism fed by many countries. Today, I hope that you dare stand by it and not be besieged politically and economically and support its people instead of encouraging. It is people over its own people. I wish you to support the Syrian. I wish you to support the Syrian dialogue and support the dialogue between you and it. I invite you today to contribute to its reconstruction as a result of terrorism and to lift the unfair sanctions against it. The Syrian Armed Forces, they differ, they are Syrian. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that pay close attention to the name of this global organization and it is lofty, noble, and arrogant goals. Thanks.
Thank you, Excellency. Good afternoon. I first wish to extend my salutations to all distinguished speakers who have taken the time to participate in this most important event, as well as thank the organizer, the Board of International Human Rights Commission, for inviting me to intervene in this forum. So we gather today to exchange on the thematics of the humanitarian and political solution of the Syrian conflict. In doing so, the conference aims at dispelling notions and/or preconceived perceptions of the conflict. I will say that dispelling ignorance about the fundamental premise from which any dialogue and/or recommendation should proceed is indeed the crux of the problem and a most daunting task. These problems of narratives and/or perception management did not as much surface in Iraq or Libya, in as much as the rationale for these wars were swiftly and conveniently swept under the rug thanks to a corporate and compliant media whose sole existence is, to this day, made possible thanks to the revenues generated by the military-industrial complex. These half-truth and/or altered narratives have, however, grown to ever larger proportions with regards to Syria, simply owing to the fact that the aggressor state's military objectives have failed. In doing so, the cost in civilian life and damage to the country's infrastructure are to date staggering, and total reconstruction costs have been estimated to reach between 250 to 400 billion US dollars. As of today, and much to the dismay of advocates of regime change, the conflict is frozen. The government of the Syrian Arab Republic, along with its allies, have managed to restore national sovereignty over 70% of the entire territory. What then is the point, one might ask, to persist in ignoring this most fundamental premise, according to which the Syrian people have steadily endorsed and supported to this day the government of President Bashar al-Assad? Indeed, how can these narratives, built on marketed concepts such as regime, butcher, how can these same narratives, built on marketed concepts such as regime, butcher, barrel bombs, chemical attacks, atrocities, systemic tortures, etc., still be the norm of a constructive dialogue in the face of over 500,000 casualties, millions of refugees, and a scorched earth policy of mass starvation of the very people the West is fond of to allegedly liberate? Excellencies, we have reached the most dire and critical junction, whereupon the meaning of words have allowed a pack of wolves to hijack the very essence of the United Nations system. This system, to be sure, isn't perfect, but it is itself the legacy of World War II, which has prevented humanity from self-annihilation for over 75 years. However, in order to give peace and resolution of conflict a chance, we must refrain from falling prey to cynicism and bad faith in order to seriously tackle the immense task of fighting the scourge of war as set out ambitiously by the Charter's founders. Let us live up to their expectations by ceasing to instrumentalize the United Nations systems and its various organs for purely political agendas. Thank you.
In the name of God, the most merciful, the most beneficent, Honorable Chairman, very Honorable Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so honored to be a part of you, among you once again, and I apologize for joining you late. Just like Mr. Chairman mentioned, I'm observing the case of one of the US citizens, African-American US citizens, Mr. George Floyd, in the hands of a white police officer. So I just came out to make a quick statement, brief statement. First of all, the intervention, I strongly believe on as a standard rule that intervention in any sovereign country should only be done by the request of the host country. And all the proxy wars of so-called superpowers must end now. It's a time that the destiny of the countries and the nations should be in the hands of the people of those countries. This war, which has killed hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians, is nothing more than the proxy war between the two superpowers and some of their representatives and friends to control the resources of Middle Eastern countries. This must end now. And I'm going to make another quick reference before I go back to the courthouse, a quick reference of the then Secretary of State of the United States of America, General Colin Powell, who came to the Security Council and made a statement that he has personally seen the weapons of mass destructions in Iraq before they destroyed the whole country, before they killed the president of that sovereign country. And that proxy war is still going on even after 1.5 million innocent Iraqis have been killed. And similarly, the same thing is going on in Syria. I think the world has to unite now and make sure that we have one voice and we are on the same page, that no intervention in a sovereign country can be done by any superpower or so-called superpower. The destiny of these countries should be in the hands of the people of that country. All the foreign powers must get out of Syria right now, and the peace efforts, and as a matter of fact, not just the peace effort, because the destruction caused by the intervention of the so-called superpower must be repaired and reconstructed. A special fund should be created after the pulling out of these governments and the powers to give the life back to these people, the people of Syria. We cannot bring the lives of those people who are killed without any of their mistake or fault, but at least we can secure the country and the community and the future of innocent children. Those children who just born during this conflict, they have the right to live and enjoy their life just like you and us, like every one of us, just like every citizen of the so-called developed countries or the Western countries. So we must demand the international community to strengthen this voice and be on the same page and demand the pullout of all the foreign wars, foreign countries and foreign powers from Syria, Iraq, and all those Middle Eastern countries, and let the future of those countries be decided by the people of those countries. Once again, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I really appreciate all your efforts and the efforts of every speaker here and participants here. Thank you so much. God bless you all, and God bless people of Syria, Iraq, and all those Middle Eastern countries who have been occupied by the superpowers for a long time. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Chairman, and all the respective dignities. And for me, I always call all of you are here. You have a true human rights heart and human rights activists and defenders. The civil war in Syria started in March 2011. It's now been 10 years since the start. Not only has this situation rocked the foundation of stability in Arab countries who have taken millions of refugees into their countries, but it has also impacted Europe, America, and every other country where refugees are traveling to. Such a grave situation has been going on for far too long now. Numerous dialogues and ceasefires have only temporarily stopped the fighting and allowed terrorists to reorganize and regroup. All of the speakers, they have shown their interest from their heart and their willingness to work. But I think we must see the situation has also affected the sovereignty of Syria with the influx of foreign troops, but also threatening neighboring autonomous regions, all which have contributed towards less stability, more chaos, as very rightly the chairman has said, and our respected Secretary General has mentioned, the foreign troops, the invasions. The situation in Syria is so periled that only it is worthy of an agenda item at the G7. I just want to remind all of my friends here, we know there is one region, Africa. There was going to be sanctions, there were going to be invasions in Zimbabwe with Mugabe. But the African countries united themselves. They said, no, we will solve our problem. Let us sit and do it. Why not the Muslim countries? What is the problem there? I think before we say to the European countries, to the Americans, or any other foreign troops, why not the Muslim countries sit themselves together? It is their problem. It is their invasions. It is their people coming inside and going outside. And same thing is happening, not in Syria, in Palestine. Same thing is happening with the Kashmiris also. The Muslims are not united. They are just looking at each other. Their own interests are there. I think it's the time for a concrete solution. The situation is in Syria is so parallel that only it is worthy of, as I said, an agenda at the G7. Every country should take it up now. I can give you the example of my country. My Prime Minister, Rauf Palme, he was not a Muslim. He was the only one who became between Iraq and Iran. All the countries, Muslim countries, they had their meetings, everyday meetings to have a ceasefire, but he succeeded. What he gave them the notice. He recited one of the words of the Holy Quran, said, the Muslims should not hit back to each other. I think it's the high time. All my friends sitting from the Muslim countries here, I said, we must wake up. It's the high time for us also, instead of looking at the others, The situation needs to change, and dialogue and a timetable must be established whereby citizens of Syria can be free again to live in their own homes. In my county, in Kalmar, we have more than 1,000 refugees from Syria coming. Who they are? Doctors, engineers, brain drain in Syria. Our countries are happy that we have educated people. We have doctors, we have teachers, we have nurses. But what is happening in Syria?
We are running out of time.
Yes, but so my request is that the Muslim countries should wake up all together. They should make up an agenda, come to the United Nations for not a ceasefire, for a permanent solution. Thank you very much, Chairman, once again.
Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Jane and it's a big honor to be here with you today, even though I'm not a politician, but I hope to represent the voice of the inside of Syria and to represent the Syrian people in general. The first thing I want to state is that the sovereignty of Syria is very important. The unity of our lands, also those points are not negotiable. I think that's the normal case of every country. None of you want their country to be divided or affected by outside forces. I have lived in Syria for my entire life. It's the only world I know. And today I wanted to focus on the human conditions of the Syrian people, the difficulties we're facing every day, which you might have no idea of. What happened in March 15, 2011 in Syria, I'll put this in my words. I don't know how to speak politics, but I know this. It's a protest and a refusal by one part or another. Kind of like when in every home you have two brothers, one of them who is very dominant and in power all the time, and the other was used to being silenced, and suddenly this man speaks up, so he will be refused. So the conflict began, but bigger forces starting to take sides with the one brother or the other. When in a house, when the mother stands with one of those brothers and the father stands with another, then the conflict will never end. Taking sides in this conflict by outside forces was like pouring gas to fire. The conflict would never end, and that's what they wanted in the first place. They wanted this war to last for a lifetime. They wanted one of the brothers to kill the other, and that's what happened. Today, in 2021, and after 10 years of conflict and war, you can imagine the results. Millions and millions of people were displaced either internally inside Syria or moved to neighboring countries like Lebanon and Jordan and Turkey, and even to Europe. So these refugees, I'm sure at first they didn't just wake up wanting to leave the country they lived in their whole life. They wanted to go home at first, but they couldn't because their home was destroyed. And these people actually, some of those refugees, and some of them are in camps, there are doctors and engineers and judges and dentists. Some of them are very well educated and they were very successful in their lives. They didn't want to be displaced. They had everything and everything was taken away from them. And all of that is just because some of the people sitting behind their offices in capitals of the world wanted their life to be ended, wanted them to stop living. And today, some of these outside forces, actually, with Syrian refugees inside of them, they are forcing restrictions on these refugees. They are stopping them from living again. They wanted them to be deported to Syria, and some of them just don't want to. They started a new life. A week ago, there was a Syrian guy in Denmark who had a stroke. His heart stopped, and he died because after hearing the decision of his departure. So you can't do that to people. You can't just destroy their home, force them to leave, and take away their life. And when they start to be, they try to live again, you also take away their life and force them to move away. That's their decision. I think refugees should be allowed to decide if they want to go back or if they don't. 10 years are enough to start a business and create a new life and try to live again. Another reason to stand against the forced departure of the Syrian refugees is that almost 60% of the Syrian people are actually counting on the money transferred to them by their loved ones and kids and family members living in Europe or in other countries. They transfer money to their families and that's how they live. Actually, more than 90% right now in the Syrian people are under the line of poverty due to this economic failure we are facing. Many of them lost their houses, and some of the families who were internally displaced and paying rent, the least rent of a livable room in Syria is 5 to 6 times more than the normal salary of the working man. A normal man working inside Syria, he needs 5 to 6 months to pay rent for 1 month. Can you imagine that? How would he support his family? You know why the prices are very high and the salaries are very low? That's because of the economic blockade forced by America and its allies, and that's had catastrophic effects actually. We reached the point of famine. I can say that. I'm very sorry, but we did. We reached the point of famine in Syria. Every single one of us is suffering. Every single one of us is hungry. Every single one of us is minimizing his payments. We need help. This has to end. So the lack of fuel affected that. Many bakeries closed their doors due to the lack of diesel. Public transport is also a major fail. People don't know how to go to work. They don't know how to go to college. They don't know how to get home after that. We are all suffering. My family and every family, we're all suffering. There is no transport. Syrians today are marked by misery. You walk down the street, you see everyone is sad. Everyone is on the edge of craziness. I just want to tell you, this economic failure is not affecting the rulers. It's not affecting the people in charge and the government. It's only affecting normal people. It's only affecting us. The Syrian government these past few days have showed a series of failures and poor judgments, actually. For example, if they came out with a statement that says we have no fuel and please citizens stay at your home and consider it as a quarantine for coronavirus, maybe, and which is actually very spread today in Syria with no room in hospitals for new patients. The government today came out and stated this, we need to close down for 15 days maybe and consider this as a quarantine. That would be better, but they do the following, okay? Pretend we have fuel and come out with a new plan for reducing the share of the citizens from this substance, and make people stand in lines, very long lines, at the doorsteps maybe of the gas station. Make people stand in lines, and sometimes for 20 hours, actually. For very long hours, we stand in those very long times, just till you reach the gas station, and only you are allowed to fill 20 liters each car, okay? If that's all fine, then hear this. The whole system is corrupted, and because of some people in charge, they take bribe, and they make cars who pay go in to the gas station, while the deserving people who have been waiting for long hours and who have been in need for this, and they deserve to go and take their share, they just keep waiting. The Syrian people have lost their respect inside. We lost a very important thing that I personally witnessed. We had better manners. When you make people suffer from hunger, and when they reach this famine, robbery will spread, and corruption will spread, bribe will spread, and every bad manner will spread. Rape will spread because they can't be married. They can't afford marriage. Some people are sick. Some people need this car for work. They count on it for daily living. You can't do that to us. Maybe someone needs this car to take a family member to hospital. We can't. The final thing I want to discuss today is education. See, the people of my generation, let's say 20 to 30 years old today, from Syria, they are mostly well educated. They came from a very rich childhood, a very healthy childhood with very good education. Myself, for example, I have 2 university degrees. As I was saying, people of my generation are well educated, better educated than the coming generation. Kids actually today, after 10 years of conflict, bombing and killings, airstrikes, poverty, displacement, crime, after 10 years of all of this, and now a famine and a big grief, a big gap was created, a big gap in the education, in the minds and manners of the younger generation. Building any human culture today, you need to start building the human himself. So I think we really need to be careful at this point for the sake of the younger ones of Syria. And as I told you before, my generation, let's say the youth generation of Syria, ages from 20 to 30, are well educated and cultured, but the little ones have been deprived from their right of proper education and healthy childhood. This situation is destructive. It can't last longer. It's the lives of all the Syrian people and the Syrian kids and childhood and our little ones. It's actually the humanity in general that's at stake if you guys don't do something as politicians and as human rights organizations to try to demand a peaceful solution for this crisis. We need a political dialogue for peace this year, and we hope this agony ends. Thank you very much for listening.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I want to, in the end of this, with the conclusion, we have drafted the one resolution on the conflict of Syria. Presenter of the chair of the International Human Rights Commission, revised draft resolutions at the conference. Having received with the appreciation the report of the Middle East Office, recalling all relevant International Human Rights Commission and United Nations resolutions, reaffirming the official policy statement of the IHRC chair on the Syrian crisis, having been informed in the briefing given by the chair and the Middle East Office on the present situation of Syria as of today, has accepted the peace plan. The government of Syria has accepted the peace plan in 2013, and then the President Bashar al-Assad has made the National Reconciliation Charter. Today, we resolve the present crisis. To resolve the present crisis in Syria, President Assad also mentioned the way forward in the televised speech which endorsed the peace plan of the International Human Rights Commission, which has been presented on the 4th of January 2013, including for the today conference, the former Prime Minister of Guinea-Bissau and the lifetime member of the International Human Rights Commission, His Excellency Rui Dato Barros, has also given a 7-point to end this conflict, will be a part of this resolution. In the light of
Chairman, I'm sorry, I'm not cutting you off, but I would like to make an announcement, if it's possible, because I told you about it before.
Yes,
please. Is it possible?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I can confirm here that I received today a call from officials in Syria inviting us to visit officially with an official delegation of the International Human Rights Commission as intergovernmental organization, and to send a letter tomorrow in this regard, after we form the official delegation and inform them about the names with all their titles, specifically to make all the official arrangements and to make all the official visits, to stand still with the all the evidence that we are working on, and to visit sites that we would like to see also, and archive this visit officially and send it back to the UN through the proper channel.
Thank you very much, Pastor. It's in very good news. So let me continue. That the light of the position of the government Syria, as indicated in the reports of the World Chair, the today delegates of the conference once more considered the situation with a view to making additional appropriate recommendation as suggested by the Prime Minister Rui Dato Barros, to send to the United Nations, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, League of the Arab States, European Union and other international organizations who want to be a part of the peace process in accordance with the policy and respect of sovereignty of the all member states of the United Nations. 1. Condemn the failure of the United Nations to address the situation of the Arab Republic of Syria and protecting its sovereignty, which is intervened by the fellow member states by providing the support to the armed opposition and some terrorist organization in violation of the United Nations Charter itself. 2. Reaffirms the all illegal action and support of the other countries in the crisis, and practical results there cannot be recognized irrespective of the passage of a time. 3. Reiterates the demands made in this resolution and by this conference, in particular, the immediate and full withdrawal of the Israel from the Golan Heights and from elsewhere. 4. Demands the Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iran, United States of America and Russia immediately cease and reverse all the action taken illegally under the international law against Syria and their support toward the armed opposition and those terrorist organizations which are terrorizing the people of Syria and killing innocent, kidnapping and killing of the foreign nationals and the journalists on the soil of Syria. 2. That we must assist the people of Syria to decide their fate and the way of democracy which they can themselves more right, but to the peaceful manner and the struggle. That we must support the present process initiated by the International Human Rights Commission with all its international collaborators to implement the reform agenda promised and accepted by the President Assad in the IHRC peace plan, followed by the suggestions given by today the Excellency Prime Minister request the serious action may be taken against those countries that are supporting the terrorism and terrorist groups, which we consider the interference in the internal affairs of Syria and every country. On the name of human rights and democracy, even that countries never allow their own peoples to have the right of a freedom of a speech and expression, and they never respect the international laws on human rights. 6. Call upon all the members of the United Nations to coordinate their activities at all international forums so as to ensure the implementation of this resolution. The need of an action according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to continue to ensure the respect of international law, which ensure the respect of each country and its sovereignty. Request the chair to follow up the implementation of this resolution, which has been presented here today in the conference, and to consult with the other international forums. Decide to add generally the session of the International Conference on the Crisis of Syria 2021 temporarily, and to authorize the World Chair to resume its meeting upon the request of the today's participants according to the Constitution of the Commission. This is the resolution which we have been drafted and we will be shared to all the participants, and I hope those who have made the remarks today should set up their own speeches so that we will be taking some more points into this resolution. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and thank you, Your Excellency, and we will be conveying to the Syrian authorities and the opposition peoples that the International Human Rights Commission going to lead the peace mission once again on the soil and outside of Syria, and the Prime Minister Rui Dato Barros